and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones, and we are so glad to have you here. Today, Newark City Council President LaMonica McIver has won the special Democratic primary in New Jersey's 10th congressional district. The election was held after Representative Donald Payne passed away. Joey Fox, Washington correspondent for the New Jersey Globe, is standing by. The political climate in the country is tense coming off the attempted assassination of former President Trump, as Republicans wrap their convention and Democrats get ready for theirs. Joining me now is Assemblyman Paul Kanitra, a Republican from Ocean County, and he is joining us from the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee. Assemblyman, it is good to see you. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, Laura, how are you doing? And technically, I'm not even in Milwaukee because the New Jersey delegation is quite a bit away. We're an hour and a half outside in Madison right now. So we have a big drive every day to get into the center of the action.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about that. You're there with the delegation. Can you tell us a little bit about the mood? How are the people you've spoken to? How are they feeling about the energy and what's going on in the upcoming election?
It's a fascinating environment in a bunch of different levels, especially considering with the assassination attempt on the president. The security is really unprecedented. There's multiple rings of security for vehicles, for people. There's a lot of walking here. There's a ton of events going on, but there's also a lot of enthusiasm. I think the incident recently has galvanized our party. The number of people on the floor, even starting as soon as the sessions go in the early hours of the evening till the very, very end, is just packed every single day. We're also hearing a message of unity from our party while we're here in Milwaukee too. A lot of people rewrote their speeches based on what happened. And we're hearing that they want to go after independent voters, that they want to bring more people into the fold. And that's the messaging that's going on stage every night.
Well, I want to take a little bit of a step back. You know, you mentioned you're nearly an hour away, or you're with the New Jersey delegation. I've had the pleasure of being able to go to a number of conventions myself. So can you talk a little bit about your role? And, you know, when we talk about delegates, you know, you get the clips on the news at the end of the evening. But can you talk a little bit about who is there, what happens, what it looks like on a day-to-day basis for this week?
So from a political nerd perspective, this is kind of the Super Bowl, right? You know, we're all here representing President Trump for his nomination as president from the Republican Party. And it's a who's who of everybody from across the state. And our delegation reflects that. So we've got the main delegates, we've got the alternate delegates, we've got the congressional main and the congressional alternate delegates. Obviously, a lot of party chairmen and chairwomen are here as well. There's a ton of sponsors making sure that all of this goes off without a hitch. And then during the day, there's a ton of programming going on, different speakers that you can go pop into, different parties where you can network with everybody. It's a fascinating environment, and usually it leads up to the end of the night where you just have a who's who of Republican national personalities speaking, and then everybody else that you see on Instagram and influencers are just walking around on a regular basis, so you get to interact with them. I'm loving every second of it.
And what is your particular role there?
So I'm a statewide alternate delegate is my role. That gives me access to just about everything. But technically, in terms of the voting for the president and the vice president, that's only if we can't fulfill our quota.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about, you know, as you were preparing to go to the convention, getting your bags packed, it was before there was the attempted assassination on former President Trump. Can you talk a little bit about the mood, how things have changed? You know, because there's a lot of talk on both sides about how things like this put things in perspective, and maybe, you know, being a little bit more thoughtful in the words that we choose, and really focusing on what matters as opposed to that political vitriol.
Look, I think that's a great question, and I can tell you, I personally watched it all unfold live because I had read some stuff online where he might be announcing his vice president during his speech in Butler, Pennsylvania. And the emotions that I saw when the president dropped to the ground, I didn't think he was getting up because I heard the numerous shots. And it was kind of a crescendo of emotions that had been building across the country on both sides of the political aisle for the last couple of years, really. And this event has caused a seismic shift on both sides. And I'll give you some examples from right here in Milwaukee as well. I'd heard that the Democrats had purchased a bunch of buses to go around the Republican National Convention here in Milwaukee the entire time. That had certain messaging about President Trump and about Republicans in general. I'd heard that all of those were pulled out of Milwaukee at the last minute because obviously they didn't want to make it look like they were preying on a certain situation or anything like that. And as I mentioned earlier, the messaging from Republicans is all about unity. I don't think this election, I don't think politics needs to get any more emotional than it already is. It's splitting families apart. It's splitting friendships apart. And hopefully from all sides of the political aisle, what happened recently with the assassination attempt, maybe we'll start a reset in terms of how we deal with each other, how we talk about politics, how we just focus on the issues. And again, as a policy wonk, as a policy nerd, that's what it really should all be about. You can yell and scream and say, my ideas are better than yours. Your ideas are worse than mine. You don't know what you're talking about. You don't know what you're talking about. But it should not get personal. We should not say that there's existential threats to democracy. We should not say that the future of the country is at stake. I think that kind of messaging in general, that rhetoric in general is very, very divisive. And we saw it hit the tipping point just a couple days ago.
Again, one other thing I want to talk about while you're there, at the convention, is about the messaging from the convention that you want to send to New Jersey voters, because not everybody, even if you're watching it on the national platform, you're not seeing what New Jersey's role, people who are speaking,
right.
And some of those messages that are going out there. Because, literally when you walk around the convention, you are rubbing shoulders with President Trump's family, with members of the media, with celebrities, with, people who have former legislators, former leaders. You never know who you're going to run into. So can you talk a little bit about, some of the messages that may not be being picked up by mainstream media?
So that's a great question too, because I think there's a tendency to focus on the politicians. And one of the really interesting components of this convention here in Milwaukee has been a focus on everyday citizens. I would say that more than half of the speakers on the floor here in Milwaukee are just regular people. They introduce them and they say a mother of four. They introduce them and they say a nurse, the teacher, a small business owner, whatever it may be. And you can see sometimes a little bit of nerves as they're walking up on the stage in front of a national TV audience, in front of a packed Viserv arena as well. But what we're seeing from these regular people is the impact on regular people of the policies. I had the chance to meet Madeline Bream the other day. She spoke on the convention floor, and on a night when Marco Rubio spoke and Governor DeSantis spoke and Governor Huckabee spoke, she might have been the most dynamic speaker. And here was just a regular woman. And it was because she was talking about her personal story, the loss of her son, how President Biden's policies contributed to that. And I would Garner, we were all walking out and talking about it and how it was resonating. And I saw her outside and she was treated like a rock star here. I ran over and I got a photo with her, and the line was going out the door to do the same. And that really hits home the everyday messaging and the impact for everyday people.
Yeah, it really is something, to experience it when you're there. And even though, New Jersey's delegation out at the convention, there's still work to be done at home. So I want to briefly just switch gears to talk about an issue back at home that you're dealing with, and that's safety and security of our Jersey Shore towns. Now, you recently held a summit with police chiefs from 12 municipalities, and you talked about the challenges so many Jersey Shores are facing. So can you just give us a little recap on that and what they told you?
Sure, appreciate it. So obviously my background before I was in the state assembly, I was mayor of Point Pleasant Beach for 4 years. I was councilman for 2 years before that. And I was born and raised and grew up in Point Pleasant Beach. So I understood the shore dynamic, having 16 towns in our district. how a lot of Trenton policies were really adversely affecting us, our residents, our quality of life, our tourism dollars, and the ability of our police to succeed. And that was the whole reason that I ran for the state assembly, was because of how disenfranchised I'd gotten and how I'd felt as mayor of Point Pleasant Beach, 1.5 square miles, just 4,500 residents, that I had reached the ceiling in terms of what I could accomplish and how I could try and stop some of these threats to the shore economy. And now that I was in there, I want to make sure that I have a line of communication to our police and actually hear how what we're doing in Trenton is affecting them on the ground, because we have a lot of ideas about how we think it's all working, and I'm happy to get into that. But in practice, there's a lot of ways that it actually is being executed and where there's restraints on them. And coming out of the summit, we found out that there's quite a bit.
Well, and can I just follow up? What laws are in place that are making it more difficult for law enforcement to do their jobs, and what can you do in Trenton to help?
Sure, and it's essentially two main things: bail reform. And again, on the surface, you say bail reform. Everybody wants a fair playing field, right? The rich billionaire shouldn't be able to walk out on the street for the exact same crime as somebody who's struggling to get by. That's great, but like Trenton and like a lot of state legislatures and like Congress tends to do, they take a simple idea and they turn it into a 50-page disaster that panders to all different groups and convolutes the issue and makes it really difficult. And then what you get in execution in terms of, let's take bail reform, is cops aren't really able to detain anybody. Now, when they talk about a good weekend, they're saying, well, only 2 or 3 of my police officers were assaulted. It erodes how people view police officers, how they interact with police officers, and the unsafe settings that they wind up putting themselves in. And there's this whole system. There's literally a computer system that puts in risk and calculates everything. And as you know, when you're doing algorithms and computer systems, it's all programmed by some individual who has an agenda or an outcome that they want to have. And what it results in is, I don't have a police background, right? I've never created any chaos. I have the ability to pay bail and everything like that. If I walked up to a police officer and popped them in the face, the odds that I'm walking out of jail that night or the next day are very, very, very high. And that is messed up. That takes away any semblance of law and order. And that's what they're seeing on the ground. And then the second issue that I'll talk about that I think is just as important is the way that they've handled the legalization of marijuana. And I am trying to look at introducing a new bill. I already have a bunch of bills out there. I almost just want to introduce a bill that says, we're legalizing marijuana for everyone over 21, period, end of discussion, and then it's done. But instead, we have this convoluted piece of legislation, and it's brought in all these social policies, and it's put all these restraints on police officers. And in execution, what we're seeing is a fear of them walking up to anybody who remotely looks like they could be under 21, under 18 years old. I mean, you could look at me, Laura, you could say, hey, Assemblyman Kanitra looks very young. Maybe I don't want to walk up to him because I don't want to infringe on his rights or take the chance that my officers are going to get in trouble. And we're failing our children in New Jersey. And this is the most important thing to talk about. We don't want to disenfranchise anybody. We don't want anybody to get disproportionately locked up, based on the crimes that they're committing or anything along those lines. But what our police officers are seeing are youth that have no respect for their badge, that constantly challenge them. And now you tell me, when you grow up, if you're 15 years old and you're used to telling off police officers, you're used to spitting in their face, not facing any repercussions, how on God's green earth are you going to handle it when you're 25 years old, you have a boss, that boss tells you did a horrible job, that boss tries to fine you, doesn't give you a raise? How are you going to move up in the corporate world? How are you going to be successful in life if we're not teaching people about cause and effect, about repercussion for actions, a carrot or a stick or whatever that may be? And that really essentially was the crux of what we were looking at in our summit, which I thought was incredibly successful.
We could probably spend an entire show just on that topic alone. Things really seem upside down, and the wrong people seem to have all the power, and those in power
Yes.
seem to be almost helpless. But we're going to have to wrap it up
Very well
there.
said.
Assemblyman, thank you so much for your time. It was so good to see you.
It's always great being on with you. Always great being on with you. Thanks so much. If we learn anything else here in Milwaukee, I'll send it your way.
Love it. Thank you. Newark City Council President LaMonica McIver has won the special Democratic primary in New Jersey's 10th Congressional District. The election was held after Congressman Donald Payne Jr. passed away. Joey Fox is a Washington correspondent for the New Jersey Globe, and he is standing by. Joey, it's good to see you. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Good to see you too, Laura.
Well, can you first provide us just an overview of the special election to replace Donald Payne and the significance for the 10th District?
Yeah, so Congressman Payne, he had represented the district for around 11 years. He replaced his own father in Congress, Donald Payne Sr. They were the first and second Black members of Congress to ever represent New Jersey. So there's a really important legacy there. And this seat is the heart of New Jersey's Black community. There are lots of Black residents all around the state, but in particular in this seat, Newark and its inner suburbs like Irvington, East Orange, Union Township. This is really where that's at. And so when he died in April after a heart attack, it was obviously very tragic. Lots of tributes poured in from around the state. But there was also the very immediate question of who's going to fill his seat. The House right now is incredibly closely divided between Republicans and Democrats. Every seat matters. So the governor scheduled a special election. The primary happened last night. This is a safely Democratic seat. So the primary is basically tantamount to election. And you saw Council President McIver, who had the support of most local Democrats, of most party people, of most everybody, and including the voters, clearly, won that race. So now she is probably headed to Congress when the seat comes before the general election electorate in September.
Right. And there was a Republican primary. When Donald Payne passed away, it was too late at that point to be able to replace him on the ballot. So that's why they had to have the special election. But there was a Republican running as well, Bucco, on the Republican side. So the Democratic primary was won by LaMonica McIver. And then the next election is coming up September 18th, if I have my dates correct.
Yeah, so it's this confusing dual structure, basically, where Governor Murphy ordered this special election to fill the remainder of Congressman Payne's term, which ends in January 2025. But that does not apply to the term that Congressman Payne was running for re-election to. And the deadline to replace him on primary ballots had already passed when he died. So essentially what happened is he won that primary uncontested, despite being dead. And then tomorrow, Democrats in the district will meet for a convention to choose his replacement on the general election ballot. That is separate from the special election, which specifically applies to the remaining 3 months of his term. So Democrats tomorrow are pretty much certainly going to choose LaMonica McIver to fill his spot on the general election ballot. They might have done so anyways, even if she had lost the primary, because she had, the establishment support. She had the support of the Newark mayor, of the Essex County Democratic chairman. But it certainly would have been more of a fight had someone else won or even come close in yesterday's primary. Instead, it was a blowout for McIver. You're going to see her chosen for the general election tomorrow, and you're going to see her join Congress for who knows how many years. So
you had 11 candidates running, and you didn't have to have a 51%. But LaMonica McIver, she had a decisive victory. Can you talk a little bit about that support that she had? Was it her message? Was it the fact that she was the president of the city council, or the support she had from Democratic leaders that helped her win?
Yeah, so I think it's a few different factors. I think right now she's at around 47% of the vote in an 11-way field, so not quite at a majority of the vote, but still, with that many candidates running, that's a pretty big mandate. I think, she was chosen pretty early on as sort of the preferred choice of local party leaders. They kind of came together to avoid a bunch of infighting and sort of select one candidate that they could all get behind, and that was her. And most other people in the district followed suit. So that conferred huge advantages. That boosted her fundraising. That gave her a bunch of boots on the ground. I also think, there was nothing. She promoted a positive message about her candidacy, and there was nothing that her opponents could really super strongly go after. This is a young, progressive, well-respected city council president from sort of the heart of the district who just generally did not make any enemies and had a lot of friends. And so you saw, her opponents, they were coming from different parts of the district. There was the mayor of Linden, Derek Armstead. There was a Hudson County commissioner from Jersey City, Jerry Walker. You had a former East Orange councilwoman named Brittany Claybrooks. You had a former Payne staffer named Shauna Melius. And you had a state economic development official named Daryl Godfrey, who self-funded some of his campaign. So all these people had these different messages in these different bases. And in some cases, they won those bases. Linden went to Armstead, Jersey City went to Walker. But in a district that's not based in those towns and where McIver had all these other advantages, they were kind of squabbling over scraps. They were each getting 5 to 10% of the vote, not really nearly the kind of support they need to win. And McIver just never had anything that they could go after her on. And so she coasted.
Do you think that when she was campaigning out there, when you talk about the main priorities she was talking about, was she really running to fill out Donald Payne's term, or is she looking to the bigger picture? Can you talk about what she was saying out there on the campaign trail in this special election? And again, we're going to have another election in November as well. So it's a little complicated, but was she running as someone to replace Donald Payne, or does she have her own vision of what this seat should be?
I mean, I think that all of the candidates were very consciously running on the Payne legacy, and that includes McIver. A Payne has represented this seat since 1989. This is sort of part of the identity of voters there. There are voters there who were born after the first Payne was elected. So,
Right.
This is very much how people think about this seat. And, Donald Payne Jr. was a very likable member of Congress. He was also pretty low key. He generally, he focused on local issues, and he sort of brought a relatively standard liberal democratic viewpoint to the district. And I think that most of the candidates kind of want to keep that in place. Maybe not the low key part. Maybe we'll see probably future Congresswoman McIver take a more high profile role in Congress. But I think that, the way that Donald Payne Jr. represented the district was something that most of the candidates are seeking to emulate, and something that most Democratic voters would want to see.
Yeah. And again, because this is such a blue district, blue congressional seat that she represents, people who win in the primary go on to win in this is a safe Democratic seat, even though the House is closely divided. This is a very safe blue seat.
Yeah, Joe Biden won this seat in 2020 with something like 80% of the vote. Congressman Payne won re-election with like 78%. It's the one majority black district in New Jersey. So yeah, this is the safest district you can get in New Jersey. It's one of the safest Democratic districts in the country. It's always good to have multiple candidates from multiple different parties running. I'm glad that Carmen Bucco is running. I think there's a couple of third-party candidates as well. But in the end, you're going to see LaMonica McIver elected to Congress.
Right. Yeah. Carmen Bucco, that is the Republican who is running. What can you tell us about that candidate? Because people they don't necessarily know, and again, because it is such a blue district, it's certainly an uphill battle.
Yeah, I mean, I'll be totally honest. I am not super up to date on Carmen Bucco myself. This is someone who he's run for the state legislature in the past. I think he's run a number of different campaigns in the past. And he will appeal to the small number of Republican voters in this district. There are two very small towns in the district, Kenilworth and Essex Fells, that voted for Donald Trump in 2020. So you do have a bit of a conservative base here, mostly among white voters in the district. So again, for the sake of democracy, I'm glad that those voters will have somewhere to put their votes. But he is ultimately a sacrificial lamb for the Republican Party.
And just final thoughts. How was turnout on Tuesday? Did it have much of a turnout? Again, as you're mentioning, a lot of people don't always realize. People are paying attention to the bigger headlines. The attempted assassination attempt on former President Trump, and that sometimes takes the oxygen out of the room. And just even listening to some of the other commentary. If Menendez stays on the ticket, people who vote for him, there's possibility that people just aren't paying attention, and they won't be paying attention because there's so much at the national level that is sucking oxygen out of the New Jersey that, if Menendez stays on the ticket, they may end up voting for him because they just don't realize. I mean, if you look at Torricelli-Lautenberg, when Torricelli dropped out, people probably voted for Lautenberg. They didn't even realize that he wasn't in office anymore. So can you just briefly talk about that?
Well, so yeah, I'll address the turnout question. When I last checked last night, turnout stood at around 25,000 votes in the Democratic primary, I believe. That will probably increase by another couple of thousand as the remaining vote-by-mail ballots and provisional ballots and et cetera are counted. For comparison's sake, when Payne won uncontested posthumously, in June in the regularly scheduled primary, he won around 30,000 votes.
Okay.
So you're not seeing a huge decrease from the regular primary, but it's not like that regular primary had amazing turnout to begin with.
Right.
So I don't think anybody is going to be writing any kind of great odes to the turnout in this race. But you're also, it's not abysmal. It's a solid number of voters came out and made their preferences clear, at least not hugely less than would have if this had been a regular primary. So I do think that despite the relatively low number of voters, McIver does have something of a mandate coming from that.
All right. Joy Fox, the New Jersey Globe, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us. I know how busy you've been this past week. Never a dull moment in New Jersey politics.
Never a dull moment.
Thank you. And that will do it for today. I'm Laura Jones. Thanks so much for watching New Jersey Politics. We look forward to seeing you back here next time.